Hi there, are you looking for a SQL queries in detailed tutorial, or are you in beginner level to learn SQL queries, or if you want to freshen up your SQL queries skills, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Learn with Sundar channel, and this is part 1 of Mastering SQL Queries in SQL Server. In this video series, we will be learning Microsoft SQL Server queries in detail with real-time scenarios. Before getting into the session, let me introduce myself. I am Sundaram Subramanian and I am working as a developer. My main stream of working domains are Microsoft technologies. Apart from my profession, I am a tech blogger. I write blogs on my own blogging site, which is learnwithsundar.com. I will leave a link in the description. Please feel free to visit. And also, I am one of the community organizer called Talklify. This is my Twitter handle. You can follow me here. Without much delay, let's get into the session. The following are the main concepts that we will be discussing in this video. Introduction to database, and in that session we will be discussing what is data, what is database, and other database service providers. And the next one is getting started in MS SQL Server, and in that session we will discuss why we need SQL Server and advantages of SQL Server. And last in this video we will be discussing about some SQL queries, like creating a database, creating a schema using queries, that is T-SQL. We will get that into later. All the examples will be discussed in the best practice method with real-time scenarios. And as a real-time example, let's develop and maintain a database for student management system. We will cover the requirements later. Now let's get into the first part. Before knowing database, let's understand what is data. Data can be facts related to any object in consideration. For example, a number of classrooms, students, benches, staffs, etc. are data related to an institution. Then what is database? We already know what is database is. A database is a semantic collection of data. Since the data is organized so that it can be easily accessed, managed and updated, and the data is organized in rows, columns and tables. Now let's look into what is DBMS. A database management system is a collection of programs that enables its users to access the database, manipulate data, and helps in the presentation of data. It also helps control access to the database by various users. Now let's look into the types of database management systems. So there are 4 major types of database management system: navigational database management system, relational database management system, which is we already know, many of us know, that is DBMS, and SQL database management system, and the last one is object oriented database management system. Now let's get into MS SQL Server. What is SQL Server? SQL Server is a relational database management system developed by Microsoft. It is primarily designed and developed to compete with MySQL and Oracle database. What is SQL? SQL Server supports ANSI SQL, that is Structured Query Language, which is pronounced as SQL. It is a language for dealing with relational databases. SQL can be effectively used for CRUD operations, that is create, read, update, delete records in a database. SQL can also go beyond this, as helping in optimizing and maintenance of databases and much more. SQL Server comes with its own implementation of SQL language called T-SQL. T-SQL is a Microsoft property language known as Transact SQL. It provides future capabilities of declaring variables, exception handling, stored procedures, triggers, etc. Now let's look into the version history of SQL Server. Microsoft and Sybase released version 1.0 in the year 1989. However, the partnership between these two ended in the early 90s. But Microsoft maintained the ownership rights and it renamed to SQL Server. Since the early 90s, subsequent various versions of SQL Server has been released, including SQL Server 2000, 2005, 2008, 2012, 2014, 2016, 2017, and now 2019. Now let's look into the SQL Server editions. The first edition we are going to look is SQL Server Enterprise. It is used in the high-end, large-scale, and mission-critical businesses. It provides high-end security, advanced analytics, machine learning, etc. The next edition is SQL Server Standard. It is suitable for mid-tier application and data marts. It includes some basic reportings. The next edition is SQL Server Web. It is designed for a low total cost of ownership option for big web hosters. It provides scalability, affordability, and manageability capabilities for small to large scale web applications. The next edition is SQL Server Developer. It is similar to an enterprise edition for non-production environment. It is mainly used for build, test, and demo purpose. The next one is SQL Server Express. It is for small scale application and free to use. Now let's get started into MS SQL Server. First, let's see why we need SQL Server. SQL Server is not only the choice for database management system. We have Oracle, DB2, MySQL, Access, FoxPro, and many others. There are many choices of database management system products. The question which comes in our mind is, why do we need DBMS, that is database management system? Let's see one scenario. If we have very small amount of data to manage, we can store the data in a spreadsheet or else in a document. But this is not a robust way to store the data. In a spreadsheet, at a time, only one user can work on the data. But what if we need 100 people to work on the same data at the same time? So we keep all our data in our database and our DBMS will manage the database. It takes control what gets access to the data. If we want to access the data, then we go through the database management system. The true power of database management system lies in the invisible stuffs, that is, the things which we can't see, like security, integrity, performance, and reliability. But most of the database management system promises these things. Then why do we need still SQL Server? The reason is it's been around 30 years in the market and very matured product. The integration is very great. We can easily integrate SQL Server with any databases or any other application. Many web hosting companies are allowing to rent or to create SQL Server databases in their server system. SQL Server comes with additional features like reporting, business intelligence, integration with other database servers. Now let's look into the SQL queries. In this part, we will be going to discuss about how to create a database using T-SQL, how to use the created database, and schema. So before creating a table, we need to consider few things. That is, one is schema and other one is normalization. Let's discuss about those in our next part of the video. But in this video, we will discuss about how to create a database, how to use a created database, and what are the schemas. Okay, let's switch into SSMS. This is our SSMS SSMS means SQL Server Management Studio. It is nothing but an IDE which gives graphical interface to connect with our MS SQL Server. Now let's create our database. Now we are in the database called master. As I said before, we are going to create a student management system. So I am going to create a database in the same name. To create a database, the syntax is we have create database name. This is the syntax. Okay, so our application is student management system. So I'm going to give the database name as student management system dev. Just want to differentiate that this is a development environment. I'm giving my database name as dev. We always give a database name with a meaningful. Okay, now when I click the execute, it will execute the statement. Now the database is created. Okay, now again I am going to execute the same sentence. What happens? We will get an error that the database is already exist. So we cannot create a database with the same name. Now we have created the database. Now we are in master database only. We need to create our tables under the student management system dev. So what I am going to do is we are going to access the created database. For that we have to use the keyword use with database name student management system dev. Now if you look in the top, our database name is changed. Now we are in our database student management system. Let's refresh our database and then you can see our new database. As for now, we haven't created any tables or any other objects. Before creating a table in our database, there are some other things we need to know before. I will be discussing two important things we need to consider before creating any tables in real-time scenarios. The first one is schemas and the other is normalization forms. In this video, we will discuss about schemas, and in the next video, we will discuss about the normalization forms. What is a schema? In simple terms, schemas are like folders within a database and are mainly used to group logical objects together. It is a way of categorizing the objects like tables, stored procedures, views, functions, triggers, indexes in a database. It defines how the data is organized and how the relations among them are associated. The schemas concepts are introduced in SQL Server 2005. A schema always belongs to one particular database and the schema is associated with a username, which is known as schema owner. A database may have one or more schemas. Let's look into the predefined schemas. By default, the SQL Server comes with the schema name called DBO. So whenever we haven't mentioned any schema for a table or any objects in database, it will automatically create under the schema name DBO. The DBO schema is owned by DBO user account. So what is DBO stands for? DBO stands for database owner. The types of database schemas, there are three types: physical schema, logical schema, and view schema. Physical schema represents the design of a database at physical level, that is how the data stored in blocks of storage is described. Logical schema represents the design of a database at logical level. That is, data can be described as certain types of data records get stored in data structures. Programmers and database administrators works at this level. View schema represents the design of database at view level. That is, it is generally describing end user interaction with database systems. What are the benefits of using the schema? A schema can be very effective object projection tool. A database administrator can maintain control access to an object. As stated before, schema will be effective way to manage the logical group of database objects within a database. Since we group the objects, it will be easy to maintain the database. The ownership of a schema is transferable and hence the database objects can move among schemas. A schema can be shared among multiple users. That is, not only one user can access schema, multiple users can access a single schema. Now we are in our database and we are going to create our new schema. So before creating a schema, we need to know what are the schemas available in the current database. To know the schema names, we will be getting the schema names from the table sys.schemas. This table holds all the schema names that are available for the current database along with the schema ID and also principal ID. The principal ID is nothing but the schema owner. We need to join the principal ID with system user table in order to know the user name. Now let's create our schema. The syntax for creating a schema is create schema with schema name. Okay, so we are going to create a student management system, and as part of this I need to hold the student details. So what I am going to give the schema name is like I am going to give the schema name as details. Now I am going to execute this statement. Okay, now we have created the schema as details. Again, now let's look into the table sys.schemas. If you look into the table, you can see our newly created schema name as details. Okay, so what happens now when we try to create details as another schema? It will throw an error that the schema is already exist in the database. So it is very clear that we can't name a schema which is already exist. So now as for an example, I am going to create an object for this schema. So I am going to create a table with the schema name details. This is just a simple example. So I am going to create a table with the schema name details dot sample as my samples as my table name and ID as my column. Okay, now we have created the table under the schema name details. Again, I am going to create another table. This time I am not going to give a schema name. I am just going to create a table as it is. So I am going to create the table as samples, and it also consists of column name ID as int. Okay, now let's look into our database tables folder. You could see two tables. Okay, the difference is I haven't given a schema name for the samples table, and one table I have given the name as schema name as details. So it is clear that by default the our SQL Server allocates DBO as the schema name. Now I'm going to delete or else going to drop the details schema. So the syntax is drop schema details. It throws an exception that we can't delete the schema details because already we have one associated object, that is details dot samples table. So once a schema is associated with any of the object, then we cannot delete the schema. That's all for the today's video's episode, and we will be covering more SQL queries in upcoming video series. In my next video series, we will be learning how to create a table by applying normalization forms, and also we will look into detail what are normalization forms. If you have any feedback or comments, you can post it in my Twitter. This is my Twitter handle. Please feel free to post your feedback and comments. Until next time, this is Sundaram signing off. Thank you.